from freedom to slavery through money and power. The Founding Fathers knew it. They saw our day. Discover what they had to say. Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry. The Founding Fathers knew that history repeats itself. It had been observed that no examples of federal republics had succeeded. It was true that the ancient confederated republics were all destroyed. So were those which were not confederate, and all ancient governments of every form had shared the same fate. Melancton Smith, Anti-Federalist Papers. We learn from history that we don't learn from history. Georg Wilhelm Hegel. Since history has proven that all governments and empires have fallen, will ours also fall? History shows us that all empires go from freedom to slavery. Money and power is their downfall. The Bible tells us, "For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." 1 Timothy 6:10. Men through the ages have sought for power and control over others through the use of money. Our founders have said, "Sir, there are two passions which have a powerful influence on the affairs of men. These are ambition and avarice, the love of power and the love of money." Benjamin Franklin. Wealth tends to corrupt the mind and to nourish its love of power, and to stimulate it to oppression. Mr. Gouverneur Morris, The Anti-Federalist Papers. To remain free, you must understand 1. Where rights come from. 2. The purpose of government. 3. The purpose of restrictions. 4. How rights are lost through no restrictions on government leaders. 1. Rights come from God, not the government. God created the earth. Then he created the plants and animals. Finally, he created man. Man is born. Upon birth, men were given certain rights by God. Life, the right to live. Liberty, the right to move about and make choices. Pursuit of happiness, the right to take of the elements of the earth that God created and make improvements to sustain himself and his family and create a better life. God-given rights are protected by obedience to God's laws. Laws are put in place to restrict destructive behavior of certain individuals. God's laws teach respect for one another's rights. They are known as the 10 Commandments. The first 5 commandments teach us respect for God and his right to be worshipped. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. Thou shalt not take the name of God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The next one is about showing respect for parents and their right to govern their children. Thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother. The last 5 show respect for others and their rights. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not covet. Use of the commandments of God. Today we use these commandments as the basis of our civil law to protect the rights of individuals. We have laws against murder, kidnapping, rape, assault, theft, forgery, counterfeiting, extortion, embezzlement, slander, false advertisement, etc. These crimes all fall under or are associated with the last 5 commandments. We have learned that there are 2 types of people: those who are honest, good, and peaceful individuals, and those who aren't. Those who work for what they get, and those who take from those who work. Those who respect the rights of others, and those who don't. Basically, we learned that there are those who keep God's commandments and those who don't. 2. The purpose of governments is to protect your God-given rights from those who would take them away. Freedom is the result of being protected from those who break the commandments. Because the bad are always inflicting harm, a form of protection had to be put into place. Otherwise, it would mean that a person would have to stay home with a gun and protect his rights and property and have no freedom, which is the reason governments are formed. With no government, there would be anarchy and no freedom. Governments are set up to protect the people's rights, making it possible for them to be free to pursue whatever course in life they want to take to improve their situation and be happy. Happiness comes as a result of being free. Governments are necessary, our founding fathers said. Why has government been instituted at all? Because the passions of men will not conform to the dictates of reason and justice without constraint. Alexander Hamilton. The people created the government and gave it some of their power. Granting some power to government leaders is necessary. Nothing is more certain than the indispensable necessity of government. It is equally undeniable that whenever and however it is instituted, the people must cede to it some of their natural rights, in order to vest it with requisite powers. John Jay. Because laws and enforcement are needed to protect rights, governmental leaders were given power to make laws. They were given the power to set up courts and jails to enforce the laws. They were also given power to set up a military, which is necessary to protect the people from those in other countries who may try to take away their rights as well. Good people must be protected from the bad. Anytime you use your agency or liberty to inflict harm on another, you should be called into account for it. This is why we have courts and jails. 3. The purpose of restrictions is to promote justice by keeping bad people from taking away the rights of the good, also to keep bad government leaders from infringing on the rights of the people as well. People need to be protected from bad leaders in government as well. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external or internal controls on government would be necessary. James Madison. A constitution had to be put in place to control government leaders. The natural tendency of men in government positions is to abuse their authority and oppress the people. There had to be rules and restrictions put in place so the people could remain free from government tyranny. These rules are known as a constitution. It is the people's laws to control government leaders. We must have one, the founding fathers said. I would observe that constitutions are not so necessary to regulate the conduct of good rulers as to restrain that of bad ones. Wise and good men will exercise power to promote the public happiness under any form of government. Brutus, the Anti-Federalist Papers. If the legislative authority be not restrained, there can be neither liberty or stability. James Wilson, the Anti-Federalist Papers. Government leaders have limited powers. They are not supposed to do everything they want to do. The powers delegated by the purposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. It will not be denied that the power is of an encroaching nature, and that it ought to be effectually restrained from passing the limits assigned to it. James Madison. That which is not expressly granted is, of course, retained. John DeWitt. The 10th Amendment states, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved by the states respectively, or to the people." 4. Rights are lost when there are no restrictions on government leaders. Bad leaders will disregard the wants of the people and pursue their own interests. The great consider themselves above the common people, entitled to more respect. Do not associate with them. They fancy themselves to have a right of preeminence in everything. Melanchthon Smith, Anti-Federalist Papers. Though this truth is proved by every page of the history of nations, to wit, that power lodged in the hands of rulers to be used at discretion is almost always exercised to the oppression of the people and the aggrandizement of themselves. Alexander Hamilton. Unfortunately, the bad always creep in. Men in governmental positions more often than not will invade on the rights of the people they have sworn to protect. For it is a truth, which the experience of all ages has attested, that the people are commonly most in danger when the means of injuring their rights are in the possession of those of whom they entertain the least suspicion. Alexander Hamilton. The process is gradual. If this government becomes oppressive, it will be by degrees. Melanchthon Smith, Anti-Federalist Papers. Bad principles in government, though slow, are sure in their operation and will gradually destroy it. Alexander Hamilton. 10 steps bad government leaders take to move the people from freedom to slavery so they can have more power and money. Step 1. They stop protecting the people's rights and start taking them away. Gradually, government leaders stop serving the people and instead have the people become their servants. Government leaders also want to spread the wealth around by taking from those who earn it to give it to those who don't earn it. They call it welfare, but it should be called legalized theft. Government leaders end up wanting more and more laws, more and more programs, more and more votes, more and more money, more and more power. There is no greater tyranny than that which is perpetrated under the shield of law and in the name of justice. Montesquieu. The Bill of Rights mentions a few of our rights. First Amendment rights. Government shall make no laws against the right of religion, speech and the press, to peacefully assemble, to petition the government for redress of grievances. Second Amendment right. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is in addition to our rights of life, liberty, and ownership of property. The Ninth Amendment states, "The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people." This means that the people have more rights than those mentioned in the Bill of Rights, and they are to be retained by the people as well. Step 2. They ignore laws in the Constitution and stop enforcing them. Abraham Lincoln said, "Don't interfere with anything in the Constitution. That must be maintained, for it is the only safeguard of our liberties." The people should make the laws. That is why government representatives should represent the people in what the people want. Those who are to be bound by laws ought to have a voice in making them. James Madison. The fundamental principle of a free government is that the people should make the laws by which they were to be governed. He who is controlled by another is a slave, and that government which is directed by the will of any one or a few, or any number less than is the will of the community, is a government for slaves. Melanchthon Smith, Anti-Federalist Papers. Government leaders begin to think they are above the law and the people. The founders said, "In so extensive a republic, the great officers of government would soon become above the control of the people, and abuse their power to the purposes of aggrandizing themselves and oppressing them." Brutus, Anti-Federalist Papers, October 18, 1787. Step 3. They gain control and power over every aspect of the people's lives through laws. Government leaders overstep their bounds listed in the Constitution and make laws on every aspect of the people's lives, many of which the people don't approve. They even exempt themselves from the laws they make. The Founding Fathers knew how dangerous that is. They can make no laws which will not have its full operation on themselves and their friends, as well as on the great masses of the society. This has always been deemed one of the strongest bonds by which human policy can connect the rulers and the people together, without which every government degenerates into tyranny. James Madison. The Founding Fathers wanted government to protect rights, but not invade on every aspect of the people's lives. But now government leaders have power over lands, homes, employment, wages, schools, immunizations, airports, recreation, automobiles, college educations, utilities, food, farming, businesses, roads, buildings, just to name a few. The only thing left is health care. The Founding Fathers said, "Miserable is the lot of that people whose every concern depends upon the will and pleasure of their rulers." Samuel Bryan, Convention of Pennsylvania, Anti-Federalist Papers. The people mistakenly let government leaders have more control and power, thinking that it will make themselves and the country more safe. To be more safe, they at length become willing to run the risk of being less free. Alexander Hamilton. The Founding Fathers knew that government leaders are known to be excessive in lawmaking. Excess of lawmaking seems to be the disease to which our governments are most liable. James Madison. It will not be denied that power is of an encroaching nature, and that it ought to be effectually restrained from passing the limits assigned to it. James Madison. Step 4. They tax the people more than they should. The bad news is that government needs money to function. This is called taxation. Government leaders can never get enough money from the people. Sir, though we may start out in the beginning with moderate salaries, we shall find that such will not be of long continuance. Benjamin Franklin. Patrick Henry knew what bad leaders were like. He said, "Beside the expenses of maintaining the Senate and other house in as much splendor as they please, there is to be a great and mighty president, with very extensive powers, the powers of a king. He is to be supported in extravagant magnificence, so that the whole of our property may be taken by this American government, by laying what taxes they please, giving themselves what salaries they please, and suspending our laws at their pleasure." How the Founding Fathers felt. The Founding Fathers felt that the taxes should come from commerce, otherwise it would become too burdensome to the people. Too much, too oppressive. The ability of a country to pay taxes must always be proportionate in a great degree to the quantity of money in circulation, and to the celerity with which it circulates. Commerce contributing to both these objects must of necessity render the payment of taxes easier and facilitate the requisite supplies to the treasury. Alexander Hamilton. In this country, if the principal part be not drawn from commerce, it must fall with oppressive weight upon the land. Alexander Hamilton. Is not the love of wealth as domineering a passion as that of power and glory? Alexander Hamilton. Bad leaders find all the ways possible to tax, and tax some more. First, it started with taxes through commerce. Then it spread to land taxes, inheritance taxes, business taxes, retirement taxes, fees and licenses, personal property taxes, gas taxes, income taxes. Inflation is a tax, the printing of more and more worthless money causing higher prices. Now they are pushing through the healthcare tax. They are also working on an international tax called cap and trade. Not only will we be paying federal taxes, state taxes, and local taxes, fees and licenses, but now they want us to pay a UN tax as well. If you can't keep what you make, it is called working for the government or slavery. Greed always comes in. It is human nature. For how will you tie his hands? Have you any sufficient decided means of preventing him from sucking your blood by speculations, commissions, and fees? Thus thousands of your people will the most shamefully be robbed. They may squander the public money so as to ruin you. Patrick Henry. Once government leaders have power, they will not be willing to give it up. A willing relinquish of power is one of those things which human nature never was nor ever will be capable of. Patrick Henry. Have you ever seen government leaders eliminate any of the laws they have placed on us, or significantly reduce the taxes we pay? Step 5. They use debt to enslave the people. Debt is seen as normal and natural. Money is made easily available through credit cards and government loans. College students are becoming more and more in debt before they graduate. Government leaders spend all the money they can, causing the nation to become very deep in debt. Thoughts on debt. When you get in debt, you become a slave. Andrew Jackson. The second vice is lying. The first is running in debt. Benjamin Franklin. Debt, an ingenious substitute for the chain and whip of the slave driver. Ambrose Bierce. Wars in old times were made to get slaves. The modern implement of imposing slavery is debt. Ezra Pound. A man in debt is so far a slave. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Do not accustom yourself to consider debt only as an inconvenience. You will find it a calamity. Samuel Johnson. Debt is the slavery of the free. Publilius Cyrus. In the long run, we shall have to pay our debts at a time that may be very inconvenient for our survival. Norbert Wiener. Government debt. I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson. We must make our choice between economy and liberty, or confusion and servitude. If we run into such debts, we must be taxed in our meat and drink, in our necessities and comforts, in our labor and in our amusements. If we can prevent the government from wasting the labor of the people under the pretense of caring for them, they will be happy. Thomas Jefferson. Step 6. They control the news media and the schools. They control the news media to get the people to go along with big government and its controls. They control the schools so they can teach children how important government is and all the great things it can do for them. This way they will go along with the idea that government is right and knows best. Designing men will use media and the schools to convince others of falsehoods that they use to further their evil plans. The people are uninformed and would be misled by a few designing men. Mr. Gary. Men of the greatest purity of intention may be made instruments of despotism in the hands of the artful and designing. It would be in the power of the enlightened and aspiring few if they should combine at any time to destroy the best establishments, and even make the people the instruments of their own subjugation. The powerful influence that great and designing men over the honest and unsuspecting by their art and address. Brutus, the Anti-Federalist Papers. Step 7. They get the people dependent on government handouts to gain power over them. People used to be independent from the government, and the government was dependent on the people. Now the government seems to be independent, and the people have become dependent. A power over a man's support is a power over his will. Alexander Hamilton. The government now provides food, housing, utilities, child care, jobs, education, loans, retirements, unemployment payments, disability payments, and soon-to-be health care. Big government. A government big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take away everything you have. Thomas Jefferson. Step 8. They allow the court system to become corrupt, so the courts are on their side and against the people. The courts were designed to be an intermediate body between the people and the legislature in order, among other things, to keep the latter within the limits assigned to their authority. Alexander Hamilton. As you can see, the Supreme Court has failed to fulfill its designed responsibility to keep government leaders within their limits. Step 9. They take away the people's last means of protection, their guns. That the people have the right to keep and bear arms, that a well-regulated militia, composed of the body of the people trained to arms, is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. Anti-Federalist Papers. Gun control. You won't get gun control by disarming law-abiding citizens. There's only one way to get real gun control. Disarm the thugs and the criminals. Lock them up. And if you don't actually throw away the key, at least lose it for a long time. It's a nasty truth, but those who seek to inflict harm are not fazed by gun controllers. I happen to know this from personal experience. Ronald Reagan. Step 10. They enslave the people and take over. The Founding Fathers knew. Generally, indeed, the ruling power carries its point the revenues of princes constantly increasing, and we see that they are never satisfied, but always in want of more. The more the people are discontent with the oppression of taxes, the greater the prince has of money to distribute among his partisans and pay the troops that are to suppress a resistance and enable him to plunder at pleasure. There is scarce a king in 100 who would not, if he could follow the example of the Pharaoh, get first all the people's money, then all their lands, and then make them and their children servants forever. I am apprehensive, therefore, perhaps too apprehensive, that the government of these states may in future times end in a monarchy. Benjamin Franklin. 10 steps government leaders take to enslave the people. 1. Stop protecting the rights of the people. 2. No longer follow the laws in the U.S. Constitution. 3. Tax the people all they can. 4. Get the people deep in debt. 5. Control the information. 6. Gain power over every aspect of the people's lives. 7. Get the people dependent on the government. 8. Allow the courts to be corrupt. 9. Take away the people's guns. 10. Bring in martial law and take over. Where are we today? The Founding Fathers felt it could happen again because it always has. The rich will strive to establish their dominion and enslave the rest. They always did, and they always will. Gouverneur Morris. The meaning of despotism is complete government control. It would be difficult to prove that anything short of despotism could not bind so great a country under one government, and that whatever plan you might, at the first setting out, establish, it would issue in despotism. For remember, of all possible evils, that of despotism is the worst and the most to be dreaded. Anti-Federalist Papers. In conclusion, the people created a system of protection that is now becoming corrupted. Our rights once protected are now being destroyed. What are you going to do now? How are you going to get the government back where it should be? Can it be done? Now you have knowledge of 1. Where rights come from. 2. The purpose of governments. 3. The purpose of restrictions. 4. How rights are lost through no restrictions on government leaders. You should also know this. Knowledge is power. What you do with this knowledge and power so you can remain free is up to you. The power is in your hands to change things. You, the people, created the government. You, the people, are the ones who gave power to the government. The government has taken more power than what was given to it. You, the people, should not be powerless against a government you created. It is time for you, the people, to take back your power. You are responsible to safeguard the Constitution. The Founding Fathers said so. An experiment of this nature would always be hazardous in the face of a constitution in any degree competent to its own defense, and of a people enlightened enough to distinguish between a legal exercise and an illegal usurpation of authority. Alexander Hamilton. The people, they as the natural guardians of the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton. It is important to gain knowledge. It gives you power. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge. I will also reject thee. Hosea 4:6. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. James Madison. You must gain knowledge about the U.S. Constitution. It is the law of the people against abusive government leaders. It lists what they can and cannot do. In other words, it is the chain that keeps our government leaders in their proper place. No restrictions on government leaders means they can run wild, and you are in fear as to what they will do next. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. If the people fears the government, there is tyranny. You must get involved. The people of the United States of America must get involved and take back control of their government before it takes total control of them, and it will if nothing is done. We must get the monster back on its chain and within its true powers. You must get involved and take action in the following ways. Attend political meetings and keep informed. Don't be afraid to stand up and speak out. Fear is the passion of slaves. Patrick Henry. Contact government leaders and let them know what you want them to do through phone calls and emails. Sign petitions and have peaceful demonstrations. Vote in good men for short terms. Enlightened statesmen will not always be at the helm. James Madison. Upon many occasions, see wise and good men on the wrong as well as on the right side of the question. Alexander Hamilton. A representative body, composed principally of respectable yeomanry, men, is the best possible security to liberty. Melanchthon Smith. Anti-Federalist Papers. The genius of Republican liberty seems to demand on one side not only that all power should be derived from the people, but that those entrusted with it should be kept in dependence on the people by a short duration of their appointments. James Madison. Frequent elections are necessary to preserve the good behavior of rulers. James Madison. Run for an office yourself. Once you know and understand the U.S. Constitution and good government principles, run for a city, county, state, or federal government office yourself. It is all about protecting yourself and your rights, unless you think you'll like slavery. Do you think God would want you to protect and care for the rights He has given you? How do you think God feels when He watches you sit back while government officials and the courts take away your freedom, the right to choose for yourself? Do not blame Caesar. Blame the people of Rome who have rejoiced in their loss of freedom, who hail him when he speaks in the forum of more security, more living fatly at the expense of the industrious. Marcus Cicero. You only have two choices. You can either make excuses or you can make progress. Stop history from repeating itself again, or at least say you did all you could have done. You owe it to yourself and all those who follow after you. Please do the right thing now. Tomorrow may be too late. This slide presentation is being distributed by Fremart Publications and was made by Linda N. Hackett. Thanks for viewing. Please visit our website, www.usconstitutionandyou.com. To learn more of what you can do, talk with the person who had you view this presentation.